I had lived in the same small apartment for almost 6 years. It was the kind of place where you knew the sound of your neighbor's footsteps, and the walls were thin enough to hear someone's late-night TV shows. Life there was quiet, predictable, until the day a young woman moved into the unit next to mine with a little girl who could not have been more than 5. The first time I saw them was on a rainy afternoon. The girl had a pink raincoat with a missing button, and she was holding a stuffed rabbit by its ear. She hid behind her mother's leg when she noticed me, her big brown eyes peeking out. I smiled and gave a small wave, not expecting anything in return. But to my surprise, she whispered something to her mother and then looked up at me. "Hi, Dad," she said. I froze. Her voice was small, almost shy, but the word hit me like a rock. Dad. I wasn't anyone's father. I didn't know whether to correct her or just pretend I hadn't heard it. Her mother gave a quick, nervous smile and told her, "Sweetie, he's just our neighbor." But the girl didn't seem convinced. She tilted her head, studying me as if she already knew me from somewhere. After that day, she would greet me every time we passed in the hallway. Sometimes she would run ahead of her mother and call out, "Dad," with the kind of joy children have when they are certain of something. I didn't understand why she kept saying it. Maybe I looked like her real father. Maybe she had never known him. I didn't ask, and her mother never explained. First, I tried to keep my distance. I told myself it wasn't my place to get involved. But something about that little girl, her curious eyes, the way she seemed to see past my walls, made it hard to ignore her. One evening as I unlocked my door, she appeared with a crayon drawing in her hands. It was of a tall man holding hands with a small girl. "This is you and me," she said simply, before running back to her apartment. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the picture, about how sure she seemed when she called me Dad. I wondered if anyone had ever told her she was wrong. I wondered if maybe she didn't want to hear it. I didn't see her for a few days after that first encounter. Life went on as usual, my morning coffee, my work, my evening walks. But every now and then, my mind wandered back to that little girl with the curious eyes and the fearless way she stood there, asking me about my cat. I wondered if she had already forgotten me. Children forget easily. Then one quiet Sunday afternoon, I heard footsteps on my porch. Slow, deliberate steps, as if the person wasn't sure they were welcome. I opened the door and there she was again. But this time she wasn't smiling. "Hi," she said, almost whispering. "Hey there," I replied, bending down slightly. "What's up?" She hesitated. "Can I stay here for a bit?" I frowned, glancing at the street behind her. "Where's your mom?" "She's sleeping," she said. "She sleeps a lot." Her voice was flat, almost rehearsed. I stepped aside and let her in. She wandered straight to the living room, sat on the rug and began petting Whiskers. For a while we didn't talk. She just stayed there, stroking the cat's fur, her small shoulders relaxing little by little. Finally, she looked up and said something that made me pause. "You remind me of my dad." The words hit harder than I expected. I'd never been called Dad before, not even in a joking way. I didn't know if she meant it as a compliment, or if it was just an innocent thought from a lonely child. "Oh," I managed. "And what's your dad like?" "I don't know," she said simply. "I've never met him." Silence filled the room. Whiskers purred softly, but it felt like even the air had grown heavier. From that day on, she came over almost every afternoon. Sometimes she stayed for only a few minutes, sometimes for hours. She'd tell me little bits about her life, how her mom worked nights, how she didn't like school lunches, how she wished she could have a dog but they weren't allowed pets. I noticed things too. Her clothes were often mismatched, her hair uncombed. She had a habit of glancing toward the window whenever she heard a car door slam, as if she was afraid someone might come to take her away. One evening, she showed up holding a crumpled piece of paper. "Can you read this for me?" she asked. It was a note from school. Something about missed homework and the need for a parent-teacher meeting. I asked her if she had shown it to her mom. "She doesn't like school stuff," she said quickly. "Can you come instead?" I hesitated. "I'm not your parent." "I know," she said softly. "But you listen." The meeting at school was awkward. The teacher was polite but clearly confused about my role in her life. I explained I lived next door and that her mom was busy. The teacher nodded slowly, but I could feel her eyes lingering on me, as if silently asking questions I couldn't answer. Afterward, we stopped by a small cafe. She ordered hot chocolate, extra marshmallows. I watched her smile for the first time that day and I realized something. I didn't know what I was getting into, but I also didn't want to stop. A week later it happened. I was in my kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner when I heard a knock at the door, loud, rapid, urgent. When I opened it, she was standing there barefoot, her eyes wide and red. "She's gone," she said. I knelt down. "Who's gone?" "My mom," she whispered. "She left. I think she's not coming back." My stomach dropped. I looked past her and saw the empty driveway, the dark windows. I knew then that this wasn't just about helping a kid next door anymore. The day started like any other. I was fixing the small fence between our yards, the one we had been talking about repairing for months. Lily was in her garden, playing with a set of colored chalks on the ground. She was drawing a sun, big and bright, with rays stretching across the cement. Every few minutes, she would glance at me and wave, and I would wave back. After a while, she walked over, holding a small cup of water. "For you," she said shyly, as if she was offering me the most precious thing in the world. I took it and thanked her, smiling at her kindness. She leaned on the fence, her little hands gripping the wooden plank. "Dad," she whispered suddenly, almost like it was a secret. I froze. My hand stopped midair, holding the cup. "What did you say?" I asked softly. She looked down, kicking a pebble with her shoe. "I mean, Mr. Tom," she corrected quickly, her voice trembling a little. I didn't push her for an answer. But that single word, Dad, stayed with me for the rest of the day. Later that afternoon, I saw her mother, Claire, in the driveway. She looked tired, her hair tied back in a loose bun, and her eyes carrying a shadow I had noticed before. We talked for a moment about the weather, about the broken fence, about nothing important. But then I asked as carefully as I could, "Has Lily ever talked about her dad?" Claire's smile faded. She glanced toward the house before answering. "He left when she was 3. No calls, no visits. She doesn't even remember his face." She tried to sound casual, but her voice cracked on the last word. She quickly excused herself and went inside, leaving me standing there, my heart heavier than before. From that day, I began to notice the little things Lily did. Things that told me she was searching for something she didn't fully understand. When I fixed a broken toy for her, she would beam like I had just given her the world. When I carried heavy groceries for Claire, Lily would follow me inside like a shadow. When I read her a story one evening while Claire was busy, she leaned against my arm and fell asleep before I could finish the last page. But I also started feeling something else, a dangerous line forming between kindness and attachment. I wasn't her father. I had no right to fill that space. And yet, every time she called for me, every time her eyes lit up when she saw me, I felt the walls in my heart begin to weaken. One Sunday afternoon, while I was painting the fence, she came running from the house, holding a paper crown made from gold foil. "You're the king," she declared, placing it carefully on my head. I laughed, but then she added, "And you're my dad." This time she didn't correct herself. She looked at me with complete certainty, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't know what to say. My chest tightened and my throat felt dry. I wanted to tell her the truth, to explain that I wasn't who she thought I was. But in that moment, the joy in her face was too pure to break. So I stayed silent. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her voice in my head. I kept wondering what it meant to be dad to someone. Not by blood, but by presence. And I also kept wondering how long I could carry that title before it would hurt her more than help her. The truth was coming. I could feel it like a storm building on the horizon. And I knew that when it came, none of us would be the same. The morning she stopped calling me Dad felt colder than any winter I had ever known. There was no snow, no wind, not even a gray cloud above us. But inside, the air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest. She stood at the doorway, her backpack hanging from one shoulder, and simply said, "Goodbye, Mr. Lee." It was the first time she had used my name instead of the word that had slowly become part of me. The word I had secretly treasured. Even though I knew it didn't belong to me. I smiled, pretending it didn't hurt, but deep down something cracked open. For days she avoided staying over. I would see her pass by with her mother, both of them busy, faces turned toward the road. I told myself she was just growing up, that children often go through phases. But each time I remembered her little voice calling me Dad. The silence afterward felt sharper. The truth came one Sunday afternoon when her mother knocked on my door. She stood there, nervous, her hands clasped together. "I think it's time we set some boundaries," she said softly. She explained that her daughter's real father had returned after years of absence. He wanted to rebuild a relationship. She thought it was best if I kept some distance to avoid confusion. I nodded because what else could I do? I wasn't her father. I had no right to fight for a title I had never earned. And yet, as she walked away, I realized I had loved that child like she was my own. That night, I sat in the dark, listening to the quiet house. No small footsteps. No laughter spilling from the living room. The chair across from mine was empty, but I could still see her sitting there, swinging her legs, asking me silly questions. People say you can't lose what was never yours. They're wrong. You can lose it, and it hurts just the same. The last few weeks before they moved away felt like a strange dream. Emily still called me Dad when she was excited or scared, but now there was a shadow in her eyes afterward, as if she remembered it wasn't true. Her mother and I never talked about it directly again. We didn't need to. Every smile, every long look we shared said what words couldn't. That something beautiful had grown between us, and it was about to be cut short. One Saturday afternoon, I found Emily sitting on the front steps of her house with her backpack already on, even though it was hours before they planned to leave. She was staring at the street like she was trying to memorize every crack in the pavement. "Going somewhere?" I asked gently, leaning against the railing. She shook her head. "Just waiting. Mom says we have to go soon. I don't want to forget this street." I sat beside her, and for a while we said nothing. The air was warm, and the cicadas hummed lazily. I wanted to tell her that streets didn't matter. That home was not about asphalt or houses, but about people. But I couldn't bring myself to say it, because I wasn't sure I would be part of her home anymore. When the moving truck came, I tried to keep my face calm. I helped carry boxes, even though each one felt heavier than it should. Emily kept close to me, following me from the kitchen to the truck, holding onto my shirt like a little shadow. Finally, her mother called, "Emily, it's time." Emily's lip trembled. She looked up at me and whispered, "Will I ever see you again?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, I promise." I didn't know if it was true, but I couldn't let her leave with anything less than hope. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I drew this for you, she said shyly. It was a drawing of the two of us in front of our houses holding hands. Above us, in uneven, childish letters, she had written, "My dad." I felt something break inside me. My eyes burned, but I forced myself to smile. Thank you, Emily. I'll keep it forever. When they drove away, Emily's small face stayed pressed against the back window until the car turned the corner and disappeared. I stood in the middle of the street long after they were gone, holding that drawing like it was the most fragile thing in the world. Weeks later, my house felt emptier than I thought possible. I'd catch myself glancing out the window, expecting to see her running toward me with some exciting news about a bug she found or a picture she drew. The silence was deafening. But one evening, as I was going through my mail, I found a small envelope with messy handwriting. Inside was a short note. Dear Dad, I miss you. Mom says we can visit in the summer. I can't wait. Love, Emily. I sat down right there on the front porch, holding the note, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled through the ache in my chest. Because even if I wasn't her real father, in her heart, I was something that mattered. And in mine, she would always be my little girl, neighbor or not. Sometimes the most powerful connections in life are not the ones written in blood, but the ones written in moments. We are often told that family is defined by birth, by shared names, by legal documents. But life has a way of showing us that love, trust, and care can build a family just as real, just as deep, and sometimes even more unbreakable. The story you just heard is not about a perfect father or a perfect family. It is about a man who by chance became a constant in a little girl's life. He wasn't her father in the eyes of the law. He wasn't the one who held her when she took her first breath. He wasn't even part of her family at the start. But in her eyes, he was Dad. And that title was not earned by biology, it was earned by presence. Presence is something we underestimate in this fast-moving world. We think we need grand gestures to show someone we care. But for a child, presence is everything. The simple act of being there, day after day, moment after moment, teaches them that they are safe, that they are seen, and that they matter. The neighbor in this story never planned to be a father figure, but by showing up, by listening, by caring, he became one. And to her, that was enough. There is a lesson here for all of us. You never know the role you might play in someone else's story. Sometimes you are the main character. Sometimes you are just a passing face. And sometimes you become the quiet hero who changes everything without even realizing it. We often measure love in years, but love is better measured in moments. Those small, unnoticed acts that seem ordinary to us but become unforgettable to someone else. A ride to school. A shared joke. A plate of cookies left at the door. A conversation on the porch when they're feeling low. To you, it might feel like nothing. To them, it might feel like the whole world. And here's the thing. Life rarely tells you in the moment that what you're doing matters. The neighbor didn't wake up one day and think, I am shaping this child's life. He just lived with kindness. And sometimes kindness is quiet. It doesn't seek recognition. It doesn't demand thanks. It simply exists, and in doing so, it changes lives. But there's also another truth in this story. Love is fragile when left unspoken. The little girl grew up believing he was Dad, but the world around her had different definitions. The day she found out the truth was not just the day she learned about her father. It was the day she learned that relationships can be complicated, messy, and hard to explain. For many of us, the moment we discover that the people we love are not exactly who we thought they were can be shattering. And yet, those moments also teach us something valuable. Love doesn't disappear just because the truth is complicated. It may change shape. It may hurt. But it doesn't vanish overnight. In our own lives, we might be carrying relationships like this, ones that don't fit into simple categories. A friend who feels like a sibling, a teacher who feels like a parent, a neighbor who feels like family. The world might not understand these bonds, but they are real. And sometimes they are the most beautiful kind of love because they are chosen, not forced. This story also reminds us of the importance of honesty, not just for ourselves, but for those we care about. Secrets have a way of growing heavier with time. They sit quietly until the moment they are revealed, and when that moment comes, the weight can be overwhelming. If you are in a place right now where you are holding back the truth from someone you love, ask yourself, am I protecting them or am I protecting myself? And if you've ever been on the other side, if you've learned a truth that shattered the way you saw someone, remember this: pain is part of growth, and growth is part of love. The girl in this story could have turned away from her neighbor, resentful of the lie, but she chose to see beyond the secret. She chose to remember the moments that mattered. And in doing so, she saved the relationship. One of the most powerful lines in this story is not spoken out loud. It's in the way she kept calling him Dad even after knowing the truth. That single act tells us everything we need to know about forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about erasing the hurt. It's about deciding that the relationship matters more than the wound. If you take only one thing from this story, let it be this: titles don't make relationships, actions do. You can call someone your father, your mother, your friend, your partner, but the real proof is in how they show up for you. And you can do the same for someone else. You don't need permission to love. You don't need a title to care. So, maybe today is the day you reach out to that person you haven't spoken to in a while. Maybe today is the day you decide to show up for someone without expecting anything in return. Because somewhere out there, someone might be quietly calling you dad, mom, or family in their heart, and you don't even know it yet. This world is full of lonely hearts, and the smallest act of kindness can be the thread that stitches someone's life back together. You don't have to solve all their problems. You just have to let them know they are not alone. And sometimes that is more than enough. Remember, the people who change our lives are not always the ones who are meant to. Sometimes they are the ones who simply refuse to walk away. So, whoever you are, wherever you are listening to this right now, be that person. Be the one who stays. Because in the end, love is not measured in DNA or legal papers. It's measured in the quiet, steady way you choose to be there again and again.